first tonight, we take a leaf out of history to make sense of what's happening in the present. 15 years ago, US President George W. Bush described North Korea, Iran and Iraq as the axis of evil. The North was blamed for starving its citizens while spending money on weapons of mass destruction, Iran for exporting terror, and Iraq for developing chemical agents and nerve gas.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger. They could provide these arms to terrorists, giving them the means to match their hatred. They could attack our allies or attempt to blackmail the United States. In any of these cases, the price of indifference would be catastrophic.
The latest evidence of that is now China's decision to veto the U.S. move. In fact, with the changing years, the times, in fact, have changed, and so have some of the players who could well make up the new axis of evil, that is Pakistan, China and North Korea. And China's decision to veto the U.S. move in the United Nations to proscribe terrorist Masood Azhar is one such example. This is the second time that China has done it. The question then, who is Masood Azhar and why is he so important for China? He's the head of jaish-e-mohammed terrorist group. It is based in Pakistan and backed by intelligence agencies in that country. It wants to unite, that group wants to unite Kashmir with Pakistan and implement the Sharia law. Azhar is wanted in India for the attack on Parliament in 2001. He is also suspected of complicity in the Mumbai attacks of 2008 and the strike on the Pathankot air base last January in India. China has its own problems with terrorism, chiefly in the Xinjiang province. But by backing Pakistani terrorism against India, China believes it is killing several birds with one stone. The China-Pakistan nexus is old and established. China is Pakistan's key military, economic and strategic partner. China sees value in using Pakistan to destabilize India. It keeps India off balance and preoccupied in South Asia. Last year in March, remember, India moved to have the Security Council put Masood Azhar on the UN sanctions list. It would have frozen his assets and banned his travel outside Pakistan. But China put a technical hold on that move, which continued until December 2016. In February this year, China again blocked a bid by the US to designate Azhar a global terrorist. Now, once more, it is ready to block a US-led move to proscribe Masood Azhar.
至于有没有提醒中国公民暂时不要前往某个地区，那么我相信中方的相关的部门或者使领馆会根据需要来发布。目前我没有这方面的信息。
Although China has cloaked its move in the garb of ensuring UN procedures that are strictly followed, Beijing has time and again shown its contempt for the international rules-based order. Its muscle flexing in the South China Sea has been blatant, showing utter disregard of the rights of littoral countries and the freedom of navigation. President Trump has accused China of not doing enough to get North Korea to the negotiating table. This, when it is widely known that without China's continued supply of oil and gas, the North could well collapse. Not too long ago, Pakistan and North Korea were involved in a worldwide black market, peddling nuclear material, technology and missiles to whoever wanted it. It's never been clear if that black market was ever fully wound up. It's even curious that North Korea is a major exporter of cheap weapons despite so many years of sanctions. Perhaps China has a hand in that as well. And to discuss this further with us, Jaidev Ranade, President of the Center for China Analysis and Studies from New Delhi, and Atul Aneja, the China correspondent for The Hindu in Beijing. Good evening to both of you. Jaidev, is this the new axis of evil?
Good evening. Good evening. Well, certainly it is, but this one has a little bit of a history. Firstly, let me talk about the Masood Azhar issue. It's the second time, as you rightly pointed out, that China is actually opposing a move made by the US in the UN Sanctions Committee, but the 8th time that it is blocking an Indian-backed or Indian request. So I think there is a history here, and not only does it indicate the extent of China's backing for Pakistan, but it also shows how hollow their own requests to us, public requests to us, to assist them as far as the Rohingya problem in Myanmar is concerned. They have been explicit that the Rohingyas in Myanmar, who are being trained according to them by the Islamic State, can easily cross over the borders from Myanmar into China and go into Xinjiang. They expect India to help out. I don't see why India should, unless there is reciprocity on this. The second thing is about the nuclear deal. I'd like to add something to what you said. The Chinese are the ones who brokered a deal, nuclear technology for missiles deal between Pakistan and North Korea when pressure came on the Chinese not to engage in such supplies. And there were a number of trips made by the Pakistanis to North Korea, 13 if I'm not mistaken, by aircraft via Hotan to North Korea, all monitored by the Chinese. And now the big question is for North Korea to actually enlarge its nuclear arsenal, for it to be able to build the missiles and for it to be able to successfully launch them. Who exactly is providing them, the raw material and the funds? And that, I think, is the question that needs to be probed. There are only two countries that can possibly supply it, and I would look at China very, very closely.
Atul, you've been smiling. I'm assuming you don't quite agree.
Well, not entirely disagree. The point is that by China not by blocking designation of Masood Azhar as an international terrorist, I think it's very, very unfortunate. Should not have happened, and doesn't send good signals, especially after the BRICS summit which we had, where, according to Indian officials, the talks were excellent between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. The statement in BRICS actually designated specific terror groups, including jaish-e-mohammed. So one thought that there might be a change of tack, but that has not happened. The second part which I want to highlight is that while it is unfortunate, one has to understand why the Chinese have done it. And to my mind, in the present context, I'm not going into history, but as I see China post 2012, after Xi Jinping has come, and I am myself here since 2014, to me, the short answer for why Masood Azhar has been sort of backed in a way is not Masood Azhar, it's Pakistan. And Pakistan is central to China's Belt and Road Initiative, specifically Xinjiang. Now, Xinjiang is the point from where China's energy pipelines go towards Shanghai and towards Guangzhou, its industrial heartland. The east-west gas pipelines coming from from Central Asia, especially Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. Now, therefore, stability in Xinjiang is central for China's energy security and for the steel Silk Road, which is the railway network, the trains which have started from the coasts in China and which are heading towards Europe. They are passing right through Xinjiang before they enter through the Alataw Pass into Kazakhstan. Now, in Chinese calculation, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if I understand them, it is that they are banking on Pakistan to help them suppress the insurgency which can be caused by the Uyghurs, by the ETIM, East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement. I think this calculation may be wrong over time, and the Chinese may realize it. But if I try to understand the rationale why they are backing Pakistan, and symptomatic of that is what they have done to Masood Azhar, I think these two very major strategic goals, which is energy security and the viability of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is behind this.
Joining us from Islamabad is our Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui. Taha, how important is Masood Azhar to Pakistan's scheme of things, given the fact that China continues to thwart international efforts to designate him a global terrorist?
Well, as far as jaish-e-Mohammed's presence is concerned in Pakistan, or sort of the spread it has, and the closeness it has with perhaps the establishment, from what we gather, is from the examples that we can see. For example, very recently, they were openly operating, collecting charity, collecting charity in Lahore, which is the center of where the government is. The Sharif families from there, the military supposedly from Punjab, in the heartland of Punjab. Jaish-e-Mohammed was going around collecting charity over Eid. Other than that, we do know Masood Azhar regularly still travels inside Pakistan. Initially, there was somewhat, there were reports that he might be put under house arrest, like Hafiz Saeed. But later on, we found out that he hasn't been put under such house arrest, or even his offices have not been sealed. His brother has been quite active in the recent times, going around the country, across the country, going into Kashmir, making speeches. So basically, it seems like, and in that sense, it's interesting to see the way in the last 1 year with Jamaat Dawa, with Hafiz Saeed, there has been some sort of cosmetic kind of actions against them. But with jaish-e-Mohammed, when it comes to jaish-e-Mohammed, very low-key, low profile. And even this aspect of the story, it's been internationally covered. I saw some wire agencies talking about how China will be blocking the move later in the week. But at the same time, in Pakistan, there's a complete media blackout also. None of the news channels, none of the newspapers are even talking about it. Jaish-e-Mohammed is sort of a no-go area, and that just shows how well entrenched it is, and how sort of where does it link up to, because that is why the media is self-censoring it, and the way it is spread out in the country without any hindrance.
Jaideep, how do you see this? Is this one of the non-negotiables in the China-Pakistan equation? Is this just a way for Beijing to needle India? Why is Masood Azhar so important to Beijing?
Well, it's three things rolled into one. As you said, one way for Beijing to needle India, but that I think is a very low objective at the moment. Certainly, it indicates massive backing to Pakistan, but it's a backing that I think will run its course in the time to come. China has its own problems, as was pointed out earlier, and it's a question of time, because they've already been telling the Pakistanis for a number of years to cool off on the Tablighi groups that are going into Xinjiang, to stop exporting terrorism into Xinjiang or assisting the terrorists who are operating inside Pakistan. So I think it's going to run its course. It will take time before China realizes that it's following the wrong policy. But in the instant case, what it is doing is what some other countries did earlier, which is describing these terrorists as one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. In this case, they claim that Masood Azhar and his ilk are Pakistan's freedom fighters. I think they realize to their cost that this is not the case. They should remember that Hafiz Saeed last year, in fact, had threatened the Pakistani government to go and check the conditions of the Muslims in Xinjiang and see whether their quote-unquote newfound Chinese brethren are treating them well or not. That just indicates the kind of radicalism that is taking hold of the Islamic society, and the Chinese, I think, are quite conscious of that now.
Atul, this is, as you said, at odds with the BRICS declaration in Xiamen. Was that just lip service by China, or is this something that China will... how do you explain, how does the Chinese government explain the fact that this technical hold, so-called technical hold, continues?
No, you see, from the Indian side, while it is regrettable what the Chinese have done, but at the same time, we can't lose sight of the big picture, and we can't have a zero-sum mentality in our relationship with China. There are broad areas of convergence, and there are serious differences which define the relationship between India and China. So my own take is that while we keep our protests towards what the Chinese have done regarding blocking of Masood Azhar, at the same time, we make sure that the other areas of engagement, and here you come to the massive potential for the economic engagement. India has 12 million people, young people entering the job market, and we are providing only 4 million jobs without foreign investment coming in. And that foreign investment has to come in from all sides, whether it's the US or it's Japan. But China, with its export surplus right now, is well positioned to make in India fly. So in that sense, I think we can't lose sight of the cooperative area while we have our problems on the other side. So it's a composite relationship. It's a composite. There are composite areas of engagement. And as Jaidev said,
You leave no opportunity in advising the government of India to join the Belt and Road Initiative. Taha, let me come to you.
I personally think we should.
Yes, I know. Only last week, Taha, China expressed concerns about the safety of its diplomats in Pakistan. There were threats. While it supports the likes of Masood Azhar and shields them, what kind of threats do Chinese installations and investments face in Pakistan, which is, we know, a safe haven for many, many terror groups?
Definitely, Palki. I mean, basically, Balochistan is where most of this China-Pakistan economic corridors, the CPEC investment is going to be. Gwadar is the port that they have built, and there has been a semi-launch of it in recent times, and trade has started happening from there. But from what we understand, it's sort of a no-go zone unless you get a no objection certificate from the military to cover it. But from what I get to know from the ground, it's a completely garrison zone, and the military is also offering is raising a new brigade just to protect the whole road from Gwadar all the way to China's border in the north, and they're going to be protecting all the trade, which is to a lot of security experts in Pakistan that I speak to, they say it will be impossible and attacks will continue. And especially if you look at Balochistan, it's a hot pot of sort of very different kind of militants. There's the Afghan Taliban, which are based out of there, the Sunni sectarian extremist groups, the Iranian-based militants, then the Pakistani Taliban, and then there are reports of, of course, the Baloch rebels, which have been leading an insurgency. So this is where most of the investment is going to go, and the Pakistan army is sort of, as of yet, it seems like has convinced China that its investment will be protected. But also another point here, from what we get to know sometimes when we get to hear about the Chinese investment, is that China is not as much concerned about the investment on the infrastructure. It is actually the route to the warm waters and the military presence and the naval presence there, which we do get some reports of, but then it's very hush-hush. But this is what some people understand in Pakistan, that China basically wants the waters, and in between it will do some trade on this road too. I see.
China's hold, we can tell our viewers, expires on Thursday, and there's little to suggest that it's going to change its mind in the next 3 days. I'm going to thank you all. Jaidev Ranade, Taha Siddiqui, Atul Aneja, thank you for joining us. The question then, where does this leave relations between India and China, and what's the way forward? We'll show you a video from the Tibet Autonomous Region, southwest China. Is being closely studied in India and probably many other countries. And this is the video. It shows two Tibetan sisters in a village bordering Arunachal Pradesh receiving a letter from China's President Xi Jinping. He advises them to become guardians of Chinese territory. Should India read anything in it, is the question. Chinese leaders are known to deliver often hard messages in an elliptical manner. China is unlikely to have forgotten the loss of face suffered during the standoff with India on the Doklam Plateau in August this year. Recall also the official spokeswoman's words, and I'm quoting, China would take all measures to uphold its territorial integrity. Since then, apart from some fudging with words to ensure India took part in the BRICS summit in Xiamen, China has been hostile. and the signals from China have not relaxed. It refused to share data with India on the flow of Brahmaputra waters. Similar data was shared with Bangladesh. Last week, President Xi Jinping called on the military to be combat ready. China will block terrorist Masood Azhar's proscription in the United States, as we've just discussed, United Nations rather. It also stems from the concern that Xi Jinping, after emerging from the 19th Party Congress with enhanced powers, may be looking to deliver India a rabbit punch, a sharp, swift strike, catching India off guard at a time and place of its choosing. Again, recall what Xi said, and I'm quoting again. Our military must regard combat readiness as the goal for all its work and focus on how to win when it is called upon. China watchers suspect Beijing's refusal to escalate the standoff on Doklam stemmed from the understanding it was at a tactical disadvantage there, but it is better placed elsewhere on the border with India. For instance, in Arunachal Pradesh, where so many valleys provide ingress into India, or in Ladakh, where there are many vulnerable points. Even the border with Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand could be vulnerable for India. So while India is holding out the olive branch, it is conscious that border disputes will now be handled by Wang Yi, foreign minister who's believed to favor a hard line on India. Key generals of the Tibet Command now sit in the Central Military Commission and the Politburo in China. China watchers also suspect that Beijing may be less willing to compromise on disputes and will be willing to contribute to the global public good only when it sees a chance to impose its rule book on a section of the international order. So is this the new axis of evil? We leave that question to you. Write to us on WIONews.com. We are taking a break. Still ahead on the show, Catalan President Puigdemont has reportedly fled the country after being charged with sedition. We're bringing you the very latest from Barcelona.